So let's talk about some qualitative research methods. And I'm going to run you through 4 of them today, probably the 4 most commonly used. But I want to caution you, qualitative research is a field where there is a lot of variation and there are a lot of ideas in how things can be done. And I'm going to run you through the basics, but there are many, many other ways that qualitative studies can be conducted. And I might refer to a few of them, but believe me, I have taught classes on qualitative research methods, and we're just scratching the surface with this list of 4. So first of all, let's talk about individual in-depth interviews. And individual in-depth interviews, or what we call IDIs, are really a pretty simple approach. They basically involve a researcher sitting down with an individual respondent and taking them through a long, lengthy interview where they ask a lot of questions. And it's very similar to what we would think of as a journalistic interview, where a journalist sits down with someone and interviews them about everything that they know about a topic of interest. And these can be conducted in person. They can also be done on the phone. And they can maybe be done through an online method, although those yield questionable results depending on who's being interviewed and what kinds of questions are being asked. The interviews for IDIs are usually very detailed. They often require a significant amount of time to complete. And when I say a significant amount, I mean anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. I mean, they can go very, very long. The interview guides themselves are usually structured or unstructured, depending on the needs of the study. And what that means, structured guides are where the questions are all written out and the interviewer is following that guide and asking just the questions that are written down. Maybe doing a little bit of what we call probing. Probing is where when someone doesn't answer a question completely, or they're hinting that they want to say a little bit more, that you follow up with a question that is meant to help them to fill out their answer a little bit more. And probes can also be structured or unstructured. So structured means that they're written down, they're on the guide. Unstructured means that it's up to the discretion of the interviewer to ask the questions that they want to ask. Also, IDIs can use some qualitative exercises, and there are all kinds of cool, interesting techniques. Some of them can involve projective exercises where you'd say things like, okay, we're going to look at these different brands of potato chips, and I want you to try to relate them to characters in a TV sitcom, and tell me which one is the Jerry Seinfeld kind of character, which one's the Kramer, and so you can have them kind of creatively look at products in a new and different way, where they have to kind of project what they view as the attributes or the characteristics of that product onto something else that's completely unrelated. There are other ideas that can be used as well. One that I just heard about recently that I really liked was called Say, Think, and Feel. And what you do is you take a picture of a stick figure, and he's got a label that you can put on him, a little thought bubble, and a little word bubble. And you can say, okay, about this product, what does this person say? What do they think? And what do they feel? And the label describes what they feel about the product. And you can kind of get a distinction for the different types of ways that someone might perceive a human being, or a stick figure in this case, feels about a product. There are all kinds of techniques like that can be used. Collaging is one that's used sometimes, where you take, rather than having people use words, you give them like magazines and they can cut out pictures and put them together in a collage and explain how that describes a product. You can use exercises like the blind alien exercise, which is where the researcher pretends to know absolutely nothing about anything, and the interviewee, research subject, has to walk them through as much detail as possible to help them to understand a product. So imagine trying to describe a bag of Fritos, Fritos corn chips, to someone that doesn't know anything. So they don't know what salty means, they don't know what corn chips are, they don't know what crunch is, they don't know what chili is that you might put the Fritos on. They don't know any of that stuff, and so you have to explain all of that to them in detail. Those are some exercises that you could use in IDIs. You can also use them in other qualitative methods, but they tend to be used in IDIs because that's where they're easiest to control and to compare. So another very common and probably the most popular and prominent of qualitative methods are focus groups. Focus groups, as we participated in class, tend to involve about 6 to 12 respondents in a group setting. These are primarily done in person, but there are ways to do them on the telephone or using online methods. Although telephone and online methods tend to be smaller in size than the in-person ones. Now, I would tell you, having done a lot of focus groups, after you get 12 people in a group, you really can't accommodate any more than that and get them done in any reasonable amount of time without people starting to feel like they're not getting to speak up or say what they really feel. So 12 is the absolute maximum, and actually I recommend really 6 to 10 for a more controlled and more productive group. Group discussions typically require between 1 to 2 hours to complete. Now that varies. 1 hour is a pretty short focus group. 2 hours is about right for what we tend to do in the United States, but in other countries, 3 to 4 hours can be the norm. It just depends really on the culture and how long people can sit still and how engaged they are with the topic of interest. So 1 to 2 hours is a good rule of thumb, but they can go longer than that. Focus groups are often, by the way, conducted in professional research facilities, and you'll have 2 different kinds of setups. One is where the observers are sitting behind some one-way glass and they're watching what's going on in the room, and the people in the room can see a mirror and they know that there's observers behind it, but they're not really paying any attention to it because it looks like a mirror. And the other way is through a live video feed, and this is becoming more common, particularly when focus groups are being done outside of research facilities. Like we set them up sometimes in hotel conference rooms or in public meeting spaces or things like that. And you'll have a video camera that is streaming a video signal either into another room or maybe over the web to a client's office, and they're watching, in an auditorium or something like that. And the nice thing about the video feed is that you don't have to cram all these people into one little room and then warn them to be quiet and not to tap on the glass or things like that, because it might distract the group. So the video feed is not distracted. On the other hand, if you have a lot of camera equipment and audio equipment and things like that, they could be kind of expensive and time-consuming to set up and tear down. And also, the presence of a camera in the room can be kind of intimidating to some respondent or some participants. Excuse me. So there are trade-offs to both approaches. Most of the time, focus groups are going to use a structured interview guide with some probes, just because there's a necessity often to do more than one group, and you need to be able to have data that are comparable between those groups so you can look at the similarities and the differences between those groups. You might also have some qualitative exercises that go on. They're not going to be as creative or as freewheeling as what you can get away with in IDIs, but we often use exercises if for nothing else than to just break up the questioning a little bit and give people a little mental break. But they often can be a very good way too of shifting gears and getting the group out of what we call groupthink, which is where people start to agree with one another, not necessarily the way that they would talk if they were individuals. Exercises can break that group think up and get people back to thinking about their own perspectives so that what they're sharing reflects what their own thoughts are. Another method of qualitative research is what we call observational research, and this comes from the fields of psychology and anthropology. And observational research has a lot of variation to it. The idea of observational research is that you're going to go out and watch what people are doing in the wild. By the way, this also comes from the field of field biology, where you go out and watch wild animals in nature. So the idea is you're going to go out and watch people in the wild. So let's say you wanted to see how people behave at McDonald's. So you're going to go and sit in a booth at McDonald's, and you're just going to watch and see how people appear to be when they're in terms of their levels of comfort and their levels of anxiety and their frustration levels and things like that. Maybe when they're ordering or when they're picking up their food or sitting down and eating. You might time how long it takes them to get through a meal, or how many refills they go back up and get of their drinks, or how many children they have with them, or what kinds of food they tend to purchase and things like that. These are all things that you can see. And one of the hallmarks of observational research is that you tend not to ask questions. You tend to just observe and to watch behaviors and emotional cues and other nonverbal behaviors. But sometimes there is an opportunity to ask questions, or there are questions that are asked in a very limited fashion, and then folks are observed. And there also are many circumstances where observational research is being done via electronic equipment, and the people are completely unaware that they're being observed. So if you see somebody sitting at McDonald's taking notes and watching you, you might assume that they're observing you, but there might be hidden cameras in that McDonald's too that are allowing researchers to watch you, and you don't know about it. The people that own the McDonald's know it, and they've allowed the cameras in there for whatever reason, but the subjects of the research don't know it. And so that means that observational research can be not only structured or unstructured. You can structure how you're going to observe people, and you can choose whether you want to take a approach where you're using a guide or not using a guide to guide you along in your observation. But you can also use what's called disguised and undisguised observational research. In other words, do people know that they're being observed? That's undisguised. Or are they unsure or unaware that they're being observed, and therefore maybe they behave a little bit more naturally, but they also, there's some ethical concerns too about disguised research. So those are some different variations that you can consider. One way to bridge all of these techniques together, at least in my view, this is kind of a combination of all of these, is ethnographic research. I'm not sure that every ethnographer out there would agree that this is a combination of focus groups, IDIs, and observation, but I feel like it gets to the heart of what all three of them are really good at doing. What ethnography is about, and this comes directly from the field of anthropology, but ethnography is about embedding yourself as a researcher within the culture of your research subject, and either following them around and just watching whatever they do, and they've given you permission to do this, you're not just stalking them, but you can follow them around and just watch whatever they do, and you can record it with a video camera, or take notes, or take pictures, or whatever they've allowed you to do. Or you can follow them around and ask questions and have them walk you through a process. So, ethnographers would tend to do things, for example, like go into the homes of interview subjects and watch them as they're preparing meals for their family. And maybe the ethnographer's been hired by a company that makes pots and pans to see how people are using the pots and pans that they own within their homes. And if the ethnographer is just observing and not actually asking a lot of questions, they are probably going to pay attention to a lot of the details, like how clean the home is, or where the pots and pans are stored, or how they tend to be used. Are they pulled out right as it's time to cook, or are they pulled out in preparation? Are they banged up? Do they have grease spots all over them? Are they treated well? Are they used as serving dishes? Things like that. All of those kinds of questions. An ethnographer who is actually asking questions of the research subject might ask about all of those things, and might also, take note of them, but ask the research subject to walk them through. What's the process? How do you normally cook dinner? What do you use these pans for? What do you think of these pans? Are they high quality? Are they low quality? Would you like better ones? Have you owned better ones? They'll ask them all kinds of things and have them really give deep, detailed responses. But unlike an interview where you're just asking people, you're just sitting in two chairs and talking back and forth, you're in a place where they can actually show you what they do in their own life, and you can see how they behave, and you can see how they're frustrated, or how they're delighted, or how they're just tired. You can see all of those kinds of things. In my qualitative research class, which I teach to graduate students, I actually showed them a video that I found that was conducted by Wendy's. It was an ethnographic study conducted by Wendy's up in Canada, where they had an ethnographer follow a lady along to the drive-thru to get food for her kids to eat for dinner. And the ethnographic video, which I'll put a link up to on the page for this video, but the ethnographic video is really great because it shows her in the process of getting annoyed and agitated as she's ordering food at the Squawk Box, and then complaining about how much money she spends on eating out, and how she thinks that the food is junky and things like that while she's waiting to get the food. And then she gets her child home and tries to feed him the food, and she has to dress it up and make it sound really special and exciting. He doesn't want to eat it. He's not that excited about it. And so you can see her frustration at just trying to get her child to eat. There's all kinds of neat insights that come out of that kind of research. And the problem with ethnography is not that it's difficult to do. It's actually quite easy to do ethnography. The problem with it is that it requires very specialized training, and it's also extremely expensive to conduct and then to analyze. So while it's useful, it really is a lot more than most clients are willing to budget for. Anyhow, those are not all, but some of the primary methods that are used in qualitative research. And now, as a counterpoint, we're going to talk about quantitative research.